When a graceful elderly woman moves into a quiet suburban neighborhood, the self-appointed HOA enforcers waste no time trying to bully her into obedience. But they picked the wrong target. What they don't know? She's a retired judge and the mother of the new town sheriff. What starts as petty intimidation quickly spirals into something darker, until justice comes knocking, and Maple Grove is never the same again. In the rolling hills of Provence, France, where lavender fields stretched toward the horizon and the air carried the faint hum of cicadas, lay the quaint suburb of St. Clair. Cobbled streets wound through pastel-colored houses, their shutters painted in shades of blue and yellow, exuding a postcard-perfect charm. It was the kind of place where retirees from across Europe flocked to escape the chaos of city life, sipping rosé under the sun and dreaming of quiet days. To Eleanor Brooks, a 72-year-old retired judge from London, it seemed the ideal spot to spend her twilight years. She'd bought a modest villa on Willow Lane, its garden bursting with roses, and arrived with little more than a suitcase, a stack of law books, and a lifetime of courtroom grit. Eleanor was no ordinary pensioner. With her sharp gray eyes, silver hair pulled into a tight bun, and a voice that could still silence a room, she carried the weight of 30 years on the bench. Born to Jamaican immigrants in post-war Britain, she'd clawed her way through a legal system that rarely welcomed people like her. Black, female, unrelenting. She'd seen it all. Corrupt cops, smug defendants, and juries swayed by prejudice. Retirement hadn't dulled her edge. It had only sharpened her resolve to live on her own terms. The trouble began a week after she moved in. St. Clair's Homeowners Association, or rather, its self-appointed enforcers, descended like vultures. They called themselves the Committee, a trio of middle-aged busybodies led by Marcel Dupont, a wiry Frenchman with a perpetual sneer and a clipboard he wielded like a scepter. His lieutenants were Ingrid Voss, a stern German expat with a penchant for passive-aggressive notes, and Peter Hartley, a ruddy-faced Englishman who muttered about keeping standards. It started innocently enough, a knock on her door, a curt reminder that her rose bushes were non-compliant with the neighborhood's aesthetic code. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching into a faint smile. "I wasn't aware roses needed a visa," she said, her British accent crisp and dry. Marcel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We have rules, Madame Brooks. You'll find St. Clair thrives on order." Order, it seemed, had a color. Eleanor noticed it in the sidelong glances from neighbors when she walked to the market. Her dark skin, a stark contrast to the sea of pale faces. She heard it in the whispers. L'étranger, the foreigner, despite her fluent French and decades in Europe. The committee's visits grew frequent, their complaints petty but pointed. Her curtains were too bright, her mailbox too modern, her very presence an unspoken affront. When she refused to budge, the tone shifted from nagging to menacing. One evening, Eleanor found a note slipped under her door. "Conform or leave. This isn't your place." The handwriting was Ingrid's, unmistakable from the passive-aggressive missives about hedge heights. Eleanor folded the note, her jaw tightening. She'd faced worse. Death threats from gangsters she'd sentenced. Hate mail from bigots who despised her robes. This was amateur hour. But the committee underestimated her. They didn't know Eleanor Brooks was more than a retired judge. She was the mother of Daniel Brooks, the newly appointed police chief of the nearby town of Aix-en-Provence. Daniel, a towering man with his mother's piercing gaze and his father's stubborn streak, had risen through the ranks of the French gendarmerie, a rarity as a black officer in a region where diversity was still a buzzword, not a reality. The harassment escalated. Paint splattered across her villa's walls one night. Red streaks spelling "Go back." Her tires were slashed. A brick sailed through her kitchen window, narrowly missing her as she brewed tea. Each act was bolder, more reckless, crossing the line from intimidation to crime. The committee thought her isolated, vulnerable. They were wrong. Eleanor didn't call Daniel right away. She'd taught him independence, and she prized her own. Instead, she dusted off her legal mind, documenting every incident with the precision of a courtroom veteran. Photos of the vandalism, timestamps, even a grainy security camera still of Marcel lurking near her property at midnight. She knew the law, French, British, international, and she knew how to wield it like a blade. When the next note arrived, threatening arson if she didn't sell the house, Eleanor decided it was time. She invited Daniel for dinner, her voice calm over the phone. "Bring your badge, love," she added. He arrived that evening, his uniform crisp, his expression a mix of concern and quiet fury as she laid out the evidence. "Ma, why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, flipping through her meticulously organized file. "Because I wanted to be sure," she replied, sipping her tea. "Now I am." Daniel's investigation was swift. The committee's arrogance had left a trail, paint cans in Marcel's garage, matching the chemical signature of the vandalism, tire tracks from Peter's Land Rover near Eleanor's driveway, Ingrid's fingerprints on the threatening notes. The trio denied everything, claiming it was just a misunderstanding, but the evidence was ironclad. Arrests followed, and the suburb buzzed with shock. The perfect facade of St. Clair cracked wide open. But Eleanor wasn't done. She sued the committee in civil court, leveraging French property and harassment laws to demand compensation and an apology. The trial was a spectacle. Marcel blustered about community standards, Ingrid wept crocodile tears, and Peter muttered slurs until the judge, a steely woman who reminded Eleanor of her younger self, silenced him with a gavel's crack. Eleanor took the stand, her voice steady as she recounted the racism woven into every act against her. "This isn't about roses or curtains," she said. "It's about who they think belongs." The verdict was a landslide. The committee paid damages, enough to renovate her villa twice over, and issued a public apology printed in the local paper. Marcel's sneer was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. Ingrid fled to Germany, and Peter sold his house, muttering about outsiders ruining everything. The neighbors, once complicit in their silence, began nodding to Eleanor at the market, some even offering sheepish smiles. Daniel dropped by one sunny afternoon, finding his mother pruning her roses, non-compliant and thriving. "You didn't need me, Ma," he said, grinning. "You had them beat before I showed up." "I raised you to clean up messes," she quipped, snipping a thorn. "But I'll admit, the badge helped." Peace settled over Willow Lane, but Eleanor knew it was fragile. Racism didn't vanish with a courtroom win. It lurked, waiting for the next target. She started a quiet campaign, coffee mornings with neighbors, talks at the community center, planting seeds of change. Some listened, others turned away. Progress, she knew, was a slow bloom. One evening, as the sun dipped below the lavender fields, Eleanor sat on her porch, a law book in her lap. A new family moved in across the street, North African, their laughter echoing as they unloaded boxes. A note appeared in her mailbox the next day, unsigned. "They don't belong." She sighed, folding it into her growing file. The fight wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But Eleanor Brooks was ready, And somewhere in the shadows of St. Clair, others were watching, wondering who'd stand next.